Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And desperate Humza Yousaf, poor, stupid, desperate Humza Yousaf, is in a serious position. He's lost a case. It was the most important case of his leadership so far. He has the option of appealing it, wasting yet more public money on a case he's not guaranteed to win, and indeed on a case he's most likely to lose. Or he could give up, but if he gives up, it's likely the Greens walk and he's reduced to a minority government. That frightens him. He hasn't got the spine for that. And so he decides now, do I appeal it and look like an even bigger wastrel, waste more money, the optics being terrible, especially for a policy that the vast majority of Scots are totally against, or do I let the Greens go and try desperately to hang on for the next 2.5 years as a lame duck First Minister? He won't last 2 years if that happens anyway. They'll get rid of him. He's already, I think, probably on the way out as it stands. And so chances are he's going to push this. But we'll take a look to see this sort of how this will play out, because he really is between a rock and a hard place. Here goes. So Humza Yousaf doesn't rule out splashing even more taxpayer cash on a gender reform appeal after his crushing defeat, because he can't spend enough money. Because it's not his money, obviously. If it was his money, it wouldn't have got there in the first place. In fact, most people are really objecting to the fact that he spent their money on this at all. Never mind to now take it to an appeal. Because obviously that's money that could be better spent on things that don't involve making lawyers rich. So the Scottish Government has already spent £230,000 of public cash on fighting the court case. And the First Minister is now considering whether to waste even more challenging the ruling. Because it will be a waste. He can't possibly win. This is the problem he's got. Humza Yousaf refused to rule out splashing even more taxpayer cash on appealing his crushing court defeat over the Gender Reform Recognition Bill. Lady Haldane ruled that the Scotland Secretary Alistair Jack was right to use the Section 35 to block the legislation from becoming law. And of course I did the video on that earlier, and it was a very good video and everyone's loving it, and everyone who's sane, everyone who's decent loves the result. There's a few nutters and morons and the sort of the rolling swivel-eyed bonkeroony SNP supporters who are saying it's terrible, it's bad, even though they wouldn't want their daughter in a position where there's going to be a grown man exposing himself to her and going, yeah, but I'm a lady now, as he's whacking his big lady cock in front of his daughter's face. But they can't accept that because it's their party and their party can do no wrong. They're very mentally ill, these people, you know. I don't mean the trans, they obviously. I'm on about SNP supporters. You have to be bonkers or mentally ill to support this party, don't you? Anyway, the Scottish Government have spent £230,000 on the court case so far, as mentioned, and its UK counterparts have also been forced into spending more than £100,000, with suggestions it will recover these after its decisive victory. Yes, it will go after the SNP, the Scottish Government, and it will take £100,000 away from Scotland. It's perfectly entitled to do that. And so the net cost to the Scottish people will be £250,000. £250,000 with nothing to show for it, and he's going to still fight on because he hasn't got the balls to stand there and run a minority government. He just can't do it. He doesn't know about, anything. This is the trouble. The guy cannot accept loss. He cannot, because the SNP are perfect, practically perfect in every way, and they can never be wrong. And so he's got to fight to prove he's right, at whatever the cost. And of course, he's just going to keep losing. Well, he could give it up, but then, like I say, the Greens walk and he's a minority government. What a place to be. And yet, the only reason he's there is because down the front of his pants, it's lovely and smooth, because he hasn't got a sack down there, has he? No balls, no spine. He's a quivering jellyfish who's completely incapable of saying to the Greens, look, you got your arse in the seats of power, your feet are under the table of government, and you have the option of leaving if you like. Or you can sit there, shut up, and deal with reality. That's what a leader would do. And if they walk, and you go, right, that's fine, we just deal with it from now on. A new problem, but at least we don't have to deal with their crap continually. But they won't do that. The Greens are never going to walk. They're earning too much money. Of course they are. They'll stay where they are and take the cash, won't they? Anyway, he can appeal this to the courts in the House and then to the UK Supreme Court, which would push the cost of the public purse higher still. Not to him personally, so he probably will. Let's face it. He's mulling this over, as a refusal to do so could bring down the current administration, as it is a red line to the Scottish Greens. It would not bring down the current administration. Firstly, the SNP would still be the party of government, just a minority government. And secondly, the Greens are not going to walk. Mr Yousaf faced the fact that gender reforms are an incredibly unpopular issue among voters, with a majority, and by that vast majority, not wanting him to launch the initial court action in the first place. And he freely admitted that the legal action was not even about gender anymore, but to protect devolution. So he's only fighting it out of principle. He doesn't even believe in the cause he's fighting. What a sad tosser this man truly is. Taking to social media, he hit out at another loss for his government in the courts. That's 7 consecutive defeats. You see, because these people are so stupid. They go, I'm going to get caught, I'm going to win at court, I'm going to win at court. But the problem is every policy they do is completely wrong because they are dim. Dim. Anyway, he said, today's judgment confirms beyond doubt that devolution is fundamentally flawed. Yes, it is. Let's stop it. Let's stop it now. He's quite right. He says the court has confirmed that legislation passed by a majority in Holyrood can be struck down by Westminster. The only way to guarantee we get true self-governance is through independence. Now, the thing is, he's only in a parliament in Scotland now because the parliament in Scotland now agreed to those rules. You can't change the rules after the game has started. If you didn't like the rules, you should have said, no, we don't want those rules at the beginning. But nobody did. They accepted them because they wanted their parliament. Them's the rules. If you don't like it, perhaps go and find a different parliament. I would suggest some people in that parliament could go to Australia, where they came from. And some people in that parliament could go to Canada, where they came from. And some people in that parliament could sod off back to Pakistan and see how successful his career there would be. Let's face it, it wouldn't. Anyway, he said, this is a dark day for devolution. Is it? I think devolution has been saved by this because it shows the people in Scotland that yes, you've got devolved powers, you can look after these, but it stops extreme nutcases and dangerous organisations like the SNP from running roughshod over the will of the people. Just because a majority at Parliament voted for it, no people voted for it. It wasn't a manifesto item. Nobody in Scotland voted for it, and that shows it's devolution in action. Something that the people did not vote for has not happened. That's called democracy. And of course he's SNP. He absolutely loathes and hates democracy because people will vote the way they want to vote, not the way he wants them to vote. One of his biggest issues is that if he steps back from the court fight, it could lead to a breakdown of the Butte House Agreement, brackets, it won't, close brackets, which means the SNP will have to form a minority administration. They've done it before, but last time they had Sturgeon in control and, balls. So, anyway, Mr Yousaf is facing calls to completely drop the legislation and start again. Alba MSP Ash Regan said hundreds of thousands of pounds have already been wasted, and it would be unimaginable for the Scottish Government to appeal this decision and then potentially proceed to asking the UK Supreme Court to overturn a decision of Scotland's highest court. And that's the problem he's got. He would then, and this is the irony of it, he'd say, oh, we want independence, we want an independent court, blah, blah, blah. Well, their independent court has said, this is correct. And now he wants the United Kingdom's Supreme Court to overrule Scotland's senior court. Look, do you want devolution? Do you want independence? Or do you accept that your courts aren't good enough? You can't have it both ways, mate. Anyway, Ash said, I resigned from the government as I simply could not support legislation that is so ill thought out, opposed by women's groups across Scotland, and a fundamental risk to the safety of women and girls. Now, much as I generally don't like Ash Regan in terms of her policies and politics, this is something I absolutely did, first of all, agree with, and secondly, admired about her. She did have the courage of her conviction, and she did walk. And I say that to her, that on this issue alone, well done. So I'm not going to. I'm not going to be two-faced about it. I did agree with that. I mean, I don't like her on other policies. I think she's a bit dim. She certainly doesn't have a finger on the pulse when it comes to independence. But on this issue, I stand beside her on that. Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross said the SNP chose to turn an issue of women's safety into a constitutional grievance, wasting taxpayers' money on a self-serving and doomed court case. Humza Yousaf must learn to listen to the court and to the public, and to ditch his government's gender self-ID bill. And absolutely he must. And he must ditch himself as well. He's a failure. He's a shockingly bad leader. And Scotland is damaged by having him anywhere near Holyrood. And I'm coming up. As Julius Caesar said in the play, cowards die many times before their death. The valiant only taste of death but once. Humza Yousaf is a coward. He's died 7 times now. Every time the courts vote against his party, he sits there and he has to take that. And he will continue to take it because he lacks the bravery to stand and fight. I guarantee he will go and take this to an appeal. Simply because, firstly, it's not his money. Secondly, it is continuing that contrived grievance to try and push for independence. And thirdly, and most importantly, he absolutely lacks the courage to say to the Greens, no. And that is why he is a very weak, vacillating nothing, a non-entity of a man devoid of honour, a man devoid of a spine. In fact, barely a man. And he's costing Scotland a lot of time and effort. This is money and that can be spent elsewhere, but it's also parliamentary time that can be used more effectively to get the problems of Scotland sorted. But he doesn't want to deal with the problems of Scotland, mainly, of course, because the SNP created most of them. And that is the heart of the matter. He needs to go. You need to get a more effective leader in the SNP and someone with the balls to tell the Greens to sod off and that the Butte House Agreement is done, dusted, burnt, buried and forgotten about. And send those stupid, ignorant, Marxist extremists back to their little chairs up the back and well away from the levers of power. And I think only Kate Forbes can do it. So maybe this is Kate Forbes' moment. Certainly if she was in charge, I think Michael Matheson would be history. Oh, there's so much wrong with that party, isn't there? Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button. I think this is probably my last video of the day, so do have an absolutely brilliant Friday night. If anything happens, I'll do a flash video. But knock yourselves out, have a great time, and I will speak to you later. Bye.